JoJo characters sometimes come off as overly intelligent, every fight being a struggle of who's more steps ahead of the other. Alongside this, you have characters making complex calculations in the span of just a few seconds, such as Kira using his air bubbles, or Jurano positioning himself to attack Black Sabbath. Araki likes to write these more cerebral fights most of the time, but that doesn't mean that every one of his characters is a genius. In fact, some are designed to be idiots, and one of the best examples of this is Okuyasu Nijimura and his stand, the hand.
噂夕映えに響く廊下室のドアそっと閉じた
Okuyasu Nijimura is the brojo of Part 4 Diamond Does Not Crash, and he started out as one of the minor antagonists at the beginning of the part, only to throughout the part become one of Josuke's closest and most trusted friends. Along with this, he grew to become one of the most adult members of the cast of Part 4, though we'll get more into that later. First we should understand the meaning behind his name. Okuyasu Nijimura is actually a pretty interesting name that on the surface doesn't look like it directly references anything specifically, but when you look into it a little bit, you start to understand that there's a lot there. First, of course, we'll start with his family name, Nijimura, which Araki mentioned that he wanted to use the kanji for rainbow or Niji at some point in JoJo, so he decided that Okuyasu would be the perfect time to use this. He then matched it up with Mura, which means village, so altogether Nijimura means Rainbow Village, which is a direct reference to an art exhibit located in the Nantun district of Taiwan. And this art exhibit was created by a former soldier, Hung Young-fu, who around 1949, due to the Chinese Civil War, fled his home country of China and sought housing in Taiwan. A small village was offered to soldiers like him and was intended to be temporary housing for them until they got on their feet, but over time it became permanent housing, though as the years went on, the homes that they were living in became more and more run down, and the government began buying the land back from them. But Hung refused to leave and quickly became the last person on his street, and due to loneliness and boredom, he began to paint the streets and the houses on this district. This was later discovered by local university students who worked to label the location as an art exhibit, with the authorities agreeing that the work should be preserved, saving this segment of the village from being renovated in any way, and the streets would gain the name, the Rainbow Village. Now, not only does the Rainbow Village story match up with the Nijimura family home, since Keicho and Okuyasu squatting in this home prevented it from being renovated and demolished, but you also have the relation to Taiwan itself through Okuyasu's given name, as the Yasu part of it means Thai or in relation to Taiwan. And speaking of Okuyasu's given name, of course I have to mention the fact that his family has a monetary naming theme found throughout their lineage, as the brothers' names contain the kanji for trillion and 100 million. And yes, I'll address that in a second. This naming theme could possibly be in reference to their father's greedy nature, naming his two sons after the thing he cared about the most, money. And this is reinforced in the Part 4 movie, where the writers decided to give the Nijimura father a actual name, one that fits him quite well, that being Manasuka, which means 10,000. And of course we see this naming theme even carry over into another universe with Kyo Nijimura, with her name meaning 10 quadrillion. Though one thing you might be interested in is why Okuyasu's name contains the kanji for 100 million and not 1 billion like his uniform would imply. Well, I discussed this with Metallic Kaiser, and he suggests that Okuyasu does in fact have that last 10 to make the billion, though it's not found in his name but in his character design. Because you see, Okuyasu's face has a very distinct scar on it, in the shape of an X. X is not only the Roman numeral for the number 10, but also the sign for multiplication, and if you multiply 100 billion by 10, you get the 1 billion that we're looking for. So it's very possible that this was Araki's intentions going forward, though what makes Okuyasu a true 1 in a billion person is his straightforward personality and insanely powerful stand, the hand. The hand is a humanoid stand which Araki wanted to design to represent Okuyasu's own personality, and he did this not only by placing the symbols found on Okuyasu's uniform throughout the hand's body, but also by giving the hand horse blinders to represent Okuyasu's own impulsive nature, with Araki saying he only sees what's right in front of him. Alongside this, it also appears that Araki took influence from baseball when making the hand, as not only is the stripe pattern found throughout the white segments of the hand very similar to that of baseball uniforms, but the padding found throughout its shoulder and body are very similar to that of a catcher, which isn't too out of the question for Araki given the fact that one of his favorite mangas is a baseball sports manga called Star of the Giants, that has gone on to influence future stand designs in the series, though one of the most important details about the hand is one of the most important parts about a catcher. his right hand, as the right hand of the hand is where all the stand magic happens, as once the right hand swipes, Okuyasu's stand ability activates, this being erasure elimination. How the ability works is whatever the hand's right palm touches while swiping is erased from the universe and sent somewhere else. This includes physical matter like the ground, a metal fence, or a sign, but it can also erase concepts like the space between two objects or people, though this erasing effect doesn't just leave an empty void where it erased. Instead, the universe corrects for the missing space by forcing together the two things bisected by the hand's swipe, as if the space between them never existed in the first place. And Okuyasu mostly uses his ability to make up for his stand's limited range by scraping away the space between him and someone else and removing the distance between them, either by pulling his target towards him or vice versa. He calls this technique teleportation, and it's his main form of combat throughout the part. Though this ability is really powerful, it has quite a few weaknesses. First of them being, for the erasure to happen, Okuyasu and the hand need to complete their swipe. If the arm is stopped in any way, the erasure won't happen, as seen when Josuke blocks the arm in their first encounter. Along with this, the stand itself is really slow, so quicker stands can easily dodge out of the way of swipes themselves without much trouble. But the biggest weakness of the stand is its own user, Okuyasu, as he's very irrational and not that smart, so he can't ever grasp the full potential of his stand. And this was intentional by Araki, as he wanted to give a supremely powerful stand to someone who's hindered by their own intelligence. Now, the hand gets its name from the Canadian-American roots rock band, The Band, started in 1968 and would ironically perform all the way up till 1999. They were a band so prominent in music that they influenced dozens of musical acts throughout their years of performing, even ones that predated them like Led Zeppelin, The Grateful Dead, Elton John, and of course, Pink Floyd, with the songwriter and founding member of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters, even saying that The Band released the second most influential record in the history of rock and roll, and that they affected Pink Floyd deeply, deeply, deeply. Someone would even refer to The Band as The Band. Okuyasu and the hand reflect this history and influence of the band by being a supporting character for his two friends who have stands named after Pink Floyd songs, helping them both grow and develop throughout the story by either bringing them together or taking away something that would harm them. So just like the world of music, without the hand, the world would be a very different place. Though Okuyasu's friends weren't the only people to develop over that bizarre summer. He himself had arguably some of the strongest bits of change, as we watched him grow from a child completely dependent on others to someone who could function completely independently. Because you see, in his introduction, he clung onto his brother's coattails, doing whatever his brother told him to do because it was easier than having to think for himself. And it's this mentality that led him to be used like a tool and nearly killed twice, but he was rescued both times. The second time costing him the life of the brother that he so looked up to. And after sacrificing himself to save Okuyasu, Keicho gave him some harsh but necessary criticism. The way he acted was no better than dead weight, and this inspired Okuyasu to try to be better than his brother and overcome his killer. And we see Okuyasu is driven by this goal when we reach the second encounter with Red Hot Chili Peppers, as Okuyasu hot-headedly takes the initiative and teleports up to the stand, beating it with an inch of its life. And right when he thought he had him beat, Red Hot Chili Peppers manipulates him just like his brother did, playing with his emotions, and he did this because he wanted Okuyasu to scrape away the ground so it could reveal the electrical circuit buried below, so he could fully charge himself up and escape, all the while mocking him for being weaker-willed than his brother, and that he had no hope for revenge if he was going to stay this way. Okuyasu takes this advice to heart, and when tasked with guarding Joseph Joestar, he is placed in, yet again, another awful situation. The enemy stand user is missing. He's all by himself in a room, there's an imposter on the ship, two guards claiming one of them's real and the other one's a fake, and Red Hot Chili Pepper is slowly worming its way towards a senile Joseph Joestar who's really being no help for the situation. Okuyasu is all alone, and for the first time, he needs to make an honest decision. And he realizes, in this moment, that he's no good at smart guy solutions, so he'll solve the problem his way. He takes a swing at one of the guards at random, with a plan to knock both of them out if it doesn't work the first time. Okuyasu knows he's not smart enough to figure out who the imposter is, so if he knocks out both of them, it doesn't matter who it is, they'll figure that out later, and wasting time thinking isn't for him. And it's from this point on, Okuyasu becomes one of the most adult characters in Part 4, not only learning to cook, but also taking up the mantle of head of the household after Keicho died, by looking after and caring for his father. Along with this, after finding a 5 million yen lotto ticket, instead of instantly blowing his money on something pointless, like Josuke plans to do, Okuyasu opts to make the adult decision, placing all the money into a savings account, so he has money for later. But one of my absolute favorite things about Okuyasu is his willingness to adopt cat grass or stray cat, welcoming the thing that nearly killed him into his home without the hint of a grudge, probably because he knew how it felt to be used like a tool by someone else for an evil plot, and probably because he's too stupid to hold a grudge. Though he acts like an adult, he still has a childlike curiosity about him, willing to go out of his way to get to the bottom of things, like when he re-entered his home to ask Josuke why he didn't heal himself with his stand, or in him seriously wanting to check out the new Italian restaurant that opened up in Moriocho. He has this glowing innocence about him, a purity that you wouldn't expect from someone who looks like he does. And we see that Okuyasu has always had a bit of good in him as well, as even when he and Josuke are enemies, he not only doesn't attack Josuke when he has his back turned to him, but also feels in debt to him for when Josuke healed him. Along with this, he shows zero hesitation when it comes to jumping in and helping his friends, even if he wouldn't be the most helpful in the situation. Okuyasu is a true bancho through and through. But honestly, one of the best things about Okuyasu's growth during Diamond is Unbreakable is that we get to see it fully paid off in the finale. As after taking a fatal blow from Kira and Stray Cat's combination attack, Okuyasu finds himself on the brink of death, walking down a long black corridor towards a light that is obviously him ascending into the afterlife. But on his way, he stumbles upon his brother. Keicho asks Okuyasu what he's doing here, and Okuyasu responds instinctively, telling him that he wanted to follow him like he used to, since he's not smart enough to decide where to go, and Keicho's never led him astray before. His answer is rejected by Keicho, telling him that he needs to make the decision on where he has to go. And Okuyasu, for the first real time in the part, has to actually think about something. And he thinks it over, and he thinks it over, and ultimately decides not to die. He chooses to leave his brother behind and go back home. A choice he couldn't have made if not for his growth throughout the part. Because he may not be a smart man, but at the end of the day, he's a man who knows what he wants. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MannyNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to erase the negativity from your life, you can start by swiping the distance between you and a copy of Shimonetta, or buy a copy of Shimonetta from buyshimonetta.com.